Anywhere you look here in Manila, you would see cars, buildings, houses, and most of all, people. Locals and foreigners, vendors and buyers, women, men, a parent, a child, an old lady, an old guy, with teeth or without teeth. They are everywhere. The Philippine population is growing, although the rate is decreasing from year 2000 to 2015. Philippine population has increased almost from 76 million to over 100 million people, and the demand for natural resources continued at an accelerated pace. These hundreds of millions of Filipinos must exploit natural resources to meet their basic demands of food, water, and shelter. Two factors drive the utilization of resources: the population size and the per capita rate of consumption. The increasing population and the desire for economic growth attended to the development of issues about environmental sustainability, which focuses on the consumption of natural capital. Natural capital are the resources provided by the ecosystem that made up the essential needs of humans. Filipinos became involved in exploitation of plants and animals for forestry, fisheries, and especially in agriculture, which is the country's main source of GDP. We all know that agriculture is concerned in cultivating lands, raising crops, feeding and breeding livestock in order to provide us food. In the Philippines, the major source of livelihood depends on agricultural sector, particularly in crop subsector. The Philippines Statistics Authority even conducted a study wherein agriculture expanded by 1.83% in year 2014. Gross earnings amounted to 1.6 trillion Philippine peso at current prices, or 9.71% higher than last year's earnings. The crop subsector, which shared 51.71% in total agricultural production, grew by 3.25% during this year. Now, let's take an in-depth look in the ecological importance of agriculture in environmental sustainability. To achieve sustainable agriculture, there should be maintenance of agriculture production while minimizing environmental impacts. As for agriculture per se, sustainable describes farming systems that maintains productivity and usefulness to society while simultaneously conserving and protecting resources as well as minimizing harsh conditions in the environment. Primarily, there are two different agricultural systems practiced all over the world. In the tropical regions just like the Philippines, a method of subsistence farming practice is the shifting cultivation or the Sweden agriculture. This method of traditional farming primarily involves the rotating cultivation in which the trees are first cut down or burned in order to allow crops to be planted. The burning of felled trees and brush serves two purposes. First, removal of debris clears the land for planting and ensuring that the plot is free from weeds or pests. Second, ashes serve as an important source of nutrients promoting plant growth. After clearing, the plot is cultivated and harvested. Such practice will have a decline in productivity with each successive harvest. The reason for this decline is that the nutrients in the form of plant tissues are being removed from the plot. Since this is a traditional method of farming, organic fertilizers are typically not used, therefore soil nutrients decline. After some time, the site is abandoned as cropland to revert natural vegetation through secondary succession. If left undisturbed or fallow for sufficient time, the nutrient status of the site recovers to its pre-cultivation levels. After some point, the site can once again be cleared and planted. The cycle goes on as other areas have been cleared, burned, and planted in which the shifting cultivation is taking place. In effect, Such heterogeneous patchwork of plot in various stages of cultivation is happening from one area to the next. Practicing Sweden agriculture requires sufficient land area for rotation or recovery period. But the problem lies in the parts of the tropics in which growing populations are placing high demands on the land for household projects, building of establishments, investments, or other recreational areas. Instantaneously, it is impossible for the sufficient recovery period, and soon after, the land quickly degraded and yield continuously declines. Beginning in the 1960s, the environmental movement drew attention to the impacts of industrialized, chemical-intensive agricultural practices on the health of individuals and the planet. These negative consequences of modern agriculture have shifted the discourse of agriculture and food security away from one of strictly growing more food to one of growing food in a way that is environmentally, socially, and economically sustainable. Industrialized agriculture dominates the temperate zone. It is mainly practiced in North America, much of Europe and Russia, sections of South America, and other areas of the world in which money and land will be able to support this kind of agriculture. The term itself, industrialized machines are mainly used in agriculture. Altogether, the use of innovative machines and fossil fuels replaces the energy supplied by humans and animals in traditional agricultural systems. Mechanizations require expanses of land for the machines to operate economically and effectively. Because certain crops like wheat and corn needs a specialized equipment, farmers typically decided to plant one crop or few crops with seasonal variations. Just like in traditional agricultural ecosystems, removal of organic matter in such plants will have no nutrient cycle. Instead, large quantities of chemical fertilizers are added to increase productivity. Nutrients are added and readily available for the uptake of plants. However, the minerals leach the surface and even towards groundwater. Since same crop varieties are planted, pests and plant diseases spread readily. In order to control them, chemical factors like insecticides, pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides are added to avoid reduced productivity. Interestingly, these chemicals will bring harsh conditions to the environment. Besides the impact on natural ecosystems, the widespread use of chemical fertilizers has impact on human health. Nitrate, a form of chemical fertilizer that leaches the surface, is a common groundwater contaminant in rural areas. Recent U.S. Environmental Protection Agency reported that 1.2% of community water systems and 2.4% of rural domestic well nationwide contain concentrations of nitrate that directly affect public health standards. Although the value seems low, the contaminated wells in Midwest resulted to have higher percentage. Higher percentage of nitrate in drinking water may result to birth defects, cancer, and nervous system impairments. Along with environmental and health problems caused by chemical fertilizers, the use of fossil energy for mechanizations and irrigation add to the growing input of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. In order to have a sustainable agriculture, it is convincing to adopt a traditional Sweden agriculture, but agricultural production must be viewed alongside with the increasing growing population. This can be accomplished in two ways, by either increasing the land under cultivation or increasing the production of food per unit land area. Historically, the total land under cultivation worldwide has risen exceptionally, keeping pace with the growing human population. However, in the last half of the 20th century, revolutions in agricultural technology and policy have dramatically changed the farming practices that resulted to the trend to slow down and the land capita under production decline. This decline was due partly to the development of crop varieties, expansion of the use of irrigation, and by the use of chemical fertilizers, particularly nitrogen. Statistically, people tend to rely on industrialized agriculture as to feed the world's growing population. In addition, by slowing the amount of land being cleared for agricultural production, we are reducing the single greatest cause of Earth's declining biological diversity, which is habitat loss. We have been dealing with environmental sustainability of agriculture from the previous discussion. Moreover, sustainable agriculture depends on a variety of methods. Sustainable farming techniques commonly include practices designed to reduce soil erosion, reduce the use of chemical fertilizers, and conserve and protect the quality of water resources. The following examples of these practices are soil conservation methods such as contour and strip cropping and reduced tillage in farming, reduced use of pesticides, insecticides, and others, alternative source of soil nutrients, replacing chemical fertilizers like the use of manure, and leguminous cover crops, water conservation, and protection. Our task now is to develop a large-scale, concise method to sustain agriculture that will minimize impacts of the environment. In other words, we are able to protect the environment and thus conserve natural resources for future. Tropical forest ecosystems have been noted for its abundance in natural resource and richness in biodiversity. In fact, approximately more than 50% of plant and animal species are found within the rainforest. The Philippines has vast percentages of these rainforests, which have high humidity and temperatures that makes it ideal and viable for organisms to live in. But in the middle of 2000 to 2005, there was a decrease of 2% in forest cover per year, which was recorded as the second highest rate in Southeast Asia. In 2005, it was recorded that only approximately 3% of the primary forest was retained. Forest cover immensely declined from 70% to 25% of overall Philippine area. Sudden deforestation of the tropical forest here in the Philippines has raised unpredictable threats in the environment like soil erosion, flooding, loss of biodiversity, and decrease in water supply. This is due to the commercial logging, establishment of agricultural lands, mining, and extraction of the natural resources needed by an increasing population in the country. Forestry phenomenon in the Philippines are driven by a number of forces. The summation of these forces had led to the increasing population growth with devastative logging. Most of the people have migrated from the lowlands to the uplands. Logging of roads and forests for clearing with the use of fire has also brought great destruction on forest grounds. Another thing, fossil fuels accelerating price has also caused great influences in the forestry sector. The government has implemented plantation of jatophragm as a source of raw material for the production of biodiesel. It is said that almost 2 million hectares of jatophragm to be placed in forest lands. Wood is the primary product for forest logging activities. Sawmill, plywood mill, pulp and paper mills would probably be using wood as their raw materials to make their output. It is said that the future of the plywood industries are highly dependent on the conservation, successful tree plantations, and its development. An approximation of 8 million families would rely on wood for their cooking. As Filipino populations grow, then acquiring wood for fuel would also be increased. One of the conserved forests and used as recreation park is the La Mesa Eco Park, covering 33 hectares of forest land. This recreation park was opened in 2004. This project would tend to help gain income to aid with the area's reforestation and maintenance. The Eco Park covers 2,700 hectares, which are split into 700 hectares covering the reservoir and 2,000 hectares scoping the forest grounds. This is just one of the projects that will help to maintain the beauty of our forest. What is expected of us in the next 5 years? there would be supportive policies indicated for forest plantation development. Additional funds will be given by the government for the rehabilitation and development management and continuous migration of the Philippine population in the forest lands. Part will give cover to the plantation of biofuels and budgets for the environmental services to be done. In conclusion, there is an expectation of a decrease in the forest cover if there would be a continuation in the usage of forest lands for fuel wood, illegal logging, and crop plantation. But this decline would also be prevented if there is a total net increase in the forest cover and an improvement of the development of the forest plantation in the country in coordination of the Filipinos to sustain the natural tropical forest ecosystem. Fishes are one of the common sources of food of many Filipinos, and fishing as the common source of nutrition, income, and economic stability. Philippines is considered to be the top 11 as a fishing nation in the whole world. Philippines is an archipelagic state with a productive seas and oceans of an estimated 2.2 million kilometers square. There is around 1.67 million tons of fishes collected yearly. Around 62% of the annual total catch of the fishes was collected from inland fisheries and aquacultures. Commercial fish production was then anticipated to rise by an estimate of 10% in order to counterbalance with the storage due to the increased demand as an effect of population growth. But due to the different levels of environmental tensions from human influences, then it resulted to the fisheries overexploitation. One example is Malthusian overfishing, which is a rise of the fisherman density population. This sometimes leads to the detrimental practices of fishing, such as blast fishing. This is also due to the competition in the markets because of the commercial and municipal fishing activities. A ceased progression in fish capture is expected to happen in the future in the coastal areas and in continuous increase in the population. This situation may lead to the less cheap fish protein food in the succeeding years. Families belonging to the Class E or lower wouldn't be able to afford even fishes to feed for their family. The country has 2,500 species, and the ideal practice would be to manage and to get the prime production from it, but it would seem impossible. In order to help sustain the fisheries in the Philippines, it is to handle it with a whole and assist it with the natural rehabilitation processes through gear limitations, law enforcement, licensing, marine sanctuaries, and other measures. Another additional way, it is suggested by the fishery biologists that by implementing new practice of fishing would decrease population sizes and an increased fish catch would be observed. Also, overexploitation in fisheries must be prohibited by the government so everyone will abide by the law. The goal of fisheries management should entail the maintenance of protein supplies for the entire nation for the present and future circumstances and to assure and protect the livelihood of many Filipino fishermen. By maximizing economic returns from fishing and sustainable catches, sustaining the stocks for spawning, reducing the fishing units up to the supportable number, fishing gears used only up to a certain limit, closed fishing grounds, restriction to the fish sizes caught, setting up a quota, and enforcing the law. By these effective procedures, it would help maintain the country's natural fisheries grounds, maintain a sustainable number of resources for the present and future, and finally conserve and maintain the aquatic ecosystems live by the most of the fishes. The Philippines is given by a bountiful and beautiful ecosystems which we could gather our natural resource. The only dilemma that the country is facing is how to sustain it. by sustaining these ecosystems would also be an advantage to our country's development of natural resources in the present and future needs of the people. It is okay to use, but please do not abuse so that the next generation could still see our country's exquisite beauty and experience its wonderful produce in the succeeding years.